Buying a racing prospect at auction can be exhilarating. The fast pace, the competition, the satisfaction of making the winning bid. Buying at auction can also be intimidating. Where do you start? What do you need to know? How can you increase your chances for success? Insider's Guide to Buying at Auction answers those questions and more. Sales officials at Keeneland and Fasig-Tipton explain the basics: how to apply for credit, what it means when you sign the sales ticket, why you need to read and understand the conditions of sale. Auctioneers and bid spotters talk about their roles in the process. Top bloodstock agents like Reynolds Bell and Mike Ryan share their strategies for buying at the sales. Well-known trainers such as Nick Zito and Craig DeLazzi explain what they look for in a horse. Find out why you should consult with a veterinarian before you buy a horse, and why you need to insure a horse as soon as you buy it. Insider's Guide to Buying at Auction demystifies the auction process and gives you the tools you need to make educated decisions. There's more to buying a horse at auction than just showing up and raising your hand. First of all, you need the guidance of reputable advisors. Go through a list of people, ask for recommendations, interview candidates.
I think someone that comes in has got to be advised by an agent or somebody who is thoroughly reliable and will look after the man, because I've seen so many rich people come into this business who've made a lot of money in the commercial world, and then they get taken to the cleaners in this business by unscrupulous people. And it happens everywhere, not just here. And I think it's most important that a buyer has a good advisor and someone he can trust and who knows what he's doing. It's not something that you can do yourself if you're not a horseman and you don't understand pedigrees, etc.
Mike Ryan, a Lexington-based agent who buys for numerous clients, agrees.
It makes a lot of sense to get some professional advice. Use somebody that's got some experience in the field of buying horses. Some of the trainers are excellent at buying horses, and some of them are not so good because they haven't had any real experience in that field. I think that you've got to try and select somebody that's doing it for a living, that's doing it all the time, because they can understand the certain conformation traits that come with certain female lines and sire lines. I would also hook up with a good veterinary firm, because in today's market you need to do your homework. You need to be well prepared. You need to have x-rays read and of course scoping done prior to sale. I think the onus is on the buyer to really do his homework prior to bidding.
New and prospective owners should have a realistic business plan. Know how much you want to spend. Know whether you want to buy yearlings or 2-year-olds, sprinters or grass horses.
I think first of all you've got to sort of set yourself a budget. You've got to realize that this is not, it's a very inexact science. And when you go to a sale, you're likely to might get carried away, or you might be rather shy bidding even up to your budget. But everybody can sees a horse that the perfect horse. There's no such thing as a perfect horse, but they find a horse that is near perfect. I think most agents, advisors and people can do that. It's if you've got a modest budget, you've got to compromise.
I don't go into the ring sort of just expecting to buy a horse. I go into the ring knowing what is the maximum we'd like to spend. I'll look at averages for the sire that individual might be by. I'll talk to the owner and see, what their limits are in terms of what they want to spend.
One of the common pitfalls is it's easy to come in and turn down the pages and pick the fancy pedigrees in the catalog. And if those fancy pages match up with good individuals, you're picking the very obvious horse. And when you find an obvious horse like that, you are going to overpay for it.
As you develop your game plan, take the time to become familiar with the auction scene.
I think one thing that we would advise anybody is when you're going to come to the sales, come for a sale or two before, get an idea of how the auction process works. I don't think that anybody new in the game can go to too many auctions to begin with and do research. Go down to the barns, talk to people when they're showing horses. Just observe from the sidelines and see how people are showing their horses, I think that's the way you get a comfort level on what you're getting into. This is a fun business, but it's a very serious business, and it's a business where you can do well successfully with it, buying, selling, racing, but it's also a business that you can lose money very rapidly if you don't go through all the processes and think everything out and have good help from all sides.
I think it's great for owners to actually put the time in and go around the barns looking at horses, spending time with somebody that can, you know, give them some insight and some information. I really think that's very, very important, that they get a feel for the time and effort that goes into it. Get as much hands-on experience as you can and spend a lot of time at the sales. You know, go around, look at the horses, look at them by yourself, look at them with somebody that either your trainer or your advisor, and then they'll get a feel for what they like and what they don't like.
When you're ready to buy, you need to establish credit with the sales company. You also need to understand your risks and obligations.
We try to make it very easy for people to buy horses. We want it to be easy for them. We want them to come in here with a degree of confidence, say, oh, I've got my seats, I've got my credit, now I'm ready to participate. Most people will request to be on our catalog mailing list, and you'll get your catalog roughly 3 weeks before any sale. In the front part of the catalog, there's a page for seat requests, should you desire seat requests. Credit requests are also in the front of the catalog. If you're a new purchaser, fill that out. It's a very simple form. It's basically the same form whatever sales you go to. And send it into the credit office. And the best thing to do is check about a week after you've mailed it in, just call and check the credit office and just check in and say, everything all right. That way you're in the computer. And once you're in the computer, then you're fine as far as coming to the sales. It's not a problem. The conditions of the sale are very clear in the front of the catalog, and every day before the sale starts, John Henderson, who's our lead announcer, always announces to please read the conditions of sale. It's the most important facet before you start raising your hand and bidding on a horse. There are certain things that consigners have to announce. Eyes, any problem with a deviation from the eyes, being cribbers, abdominal surgery, horses less than 2 years of age. You have to be aware of that. You have to read those conditions very carefully. Now, we have now provided a repository, which are located in trailers down below the pavilion, and we have asked consigners, and it's a voluntary process, but it's a very good process, to turn in x-rays, which are taken within 15 days of when the horse is sold, and they're down in the repository. So your vet can go down and look at x-rays of all the yearlings or 2-year-olds, whatever, and he can ascertain as to what he thinks the suitability of that particular horse is for training via the x-rays.
When they deal with us, they need to know our terms and conditions. You know, is a horse returnable? What homework do they need to do prior to? When do we demand that we be paid? And need to be very familiar with the terms and conditions. And that's how they need to deal with the sale company. And you know, we certainly can't select the right horse for them or even point them in a different direction. We represent all of our consigners. Our conditions are fairly similar for a yearling sale as they are a 2-year-old sale. Since we've gone to the repository, there are less warranties offered, but we're supplying more information. So with the information at hand, you know, you need to know if you have any protection or if you don't. And basically, the sales are as is. And you know, when you're dealing with an as-is sale, you need to have your homework done prior to holding your hand up.
Most major auction companies sell horses at a fast clip, about 1 every 2 minutes, or 30 per hour. For new buyers, the pace, the gestures, and the competition can be intimidating. Ryan Mahan, an auctioneer for Keeneland, Barrett's, and OBS, explains the role of the auction team.
I think buyer confidence is extremely important. I think that when they're making a value determination that they have to do before they come to a sale, if we can give all the information, extrapolate the important parts of the information, disseminate that immediately, give that to the people in the audience, they can make a decision, a business decision, where they want to put their last bid. I see us as an advisor to the buyer. Keep in mind that the buyer has to make a determination. When they walk in here into the arena, they have to open the deal, negotiate the deal. They have to feel the nuances of the auction, the tempo of the auction. They have to then close the deal, reanalyze the deal, and finally, students, you've got 45 seconds to complete this assignment. I think it's very intimidating. at any level, whether it's a $1,000 horse or whether it's a $7 million broodmare. I think it's terribly intimidating. We have to work very hard as bid spotters and auctioneers to make people feel at home here.
I think it's good for new people to come up, and if you're sitting in a section, learn your bid spotter. Don't be afraid to come up and introduce yourself and tell them, I'm here to buy horses. Of course, that's the reason they're sitting in the crowd, but don't be afraid to talk to the bid spotter. He's your friend. That's what he's there for, to accommodate you. Most people will bid with their hand, their fingers, they'll raise their hand. A lot of it is eye contact. Most of it is a nod, strictly a nod from the head. I would say the majority of it is from the head. Very important eye contact. Oh, I've had people tell me whenever they take a drag off of a cigarette, take a puff off of a cigarette, or a foot out in the aisle, take a pen out of their pocket.
Buying a horse at auction can be the ultimate gamble. A horse might earn 20 times its purchase price, win the Kentucky Derby, and become a successful stallion. Or a horse might end up costing its owner money. Hard work and experience can increase the odds of making a good investment. Several top agents and trainers talk about their strategies for buying successfully at auction.
First thing I'll do is find out from my clients what they're really interested in trying to buy. And that helps me narrow the catalog down to some extent in terms of their objectives. If they want a colt to race, obviously I can look at just the colts. If it's a colt or a filly, then we have to look at more horses. But what I try to do is figure out what the goal is of the client. And then from there, I'll go through the catalog and try to identify horses in the catalog that might fit what that particular client's looking for.
I wait until the catalogs arrive, and then I go through them quite slowly, sort of listing those animals of interest to clients of mine, fill in what updates I can find before the arrival of the various books, guides that can help you do this.
Depending on who they represent, agents and trainers usually focus on specific kinds of horses. Craig DeLazzi, trainer of 1998 sprint champion Re-Rays, also likes to give the offspring of new stallions a chance.
I basically go through the catalog, look at what sires, new precocious young sires I like. I go over it with my owners and we talk about it, but I like a young sire, a sire that's run a lot and that's kind of, stamps his foals and has that look to him.
Most of my clients leave it up to me. Some of them prefer horses to run on the turf, some of them prefer dirt horses, but most of my clients want horses that can go 2 turns. They're really not interested in horses for the short term, early 2-year-olds that fizzle out come August. I look for a horse that goes a distance of ground, that the future is in a 3-year-old and 4-year-old campaign. I really like buying yearlings from first crop sires, the unknowns. I've been very lucky doing that. Fly So Free was the first crop of Time for a Change, and he turned out to be a very good horse. Been very lucky with Theatrical. He was another first crop sire that I got lucky with.
European and Japanese buyers often have a different set of criteria for buying horses. Agent Patrick Barb, who represents the Yoshida family of Japan, explains what his clients look for at the sales.
The main criteria is to buy a horse which is adapted for racing in Japan, which means a horse who can run mainly on dirt and grass, and with a racing distance which is usually above a mile. It's very rare that we buy sprinting horses, and anything which looks like being top class anywhere in the world. We usually buy horses which are from a proven brood mares, or it's very rare that we buy first crop horses unless it were a phenomenon stallion. Mainly I'm looking for bloodlines which I know of, which I feel were very good, and there are very specific lines which I like to buy from. And in the catalog of 3,000, maybe there are only, I would say, 100 horses in which we are really interested. And out of these 100 bloodlines, we have to select the stallions, and so we end up having a short list maybe of 50 horses, which are mainly in the first 2 days.
Well, the sale yearlings, especially we're buying the colts, we want colts that we think can race in Europe. And this year and last year we tried to buy yearlings by sires that we thought would be suitable to Europe and proven horses. We did experiment with a few. We bought Tabasco Cat, I think, this year. But basically we try and buy horses that suit the European program. And when we're buying weanlings here, it's a different category because we like to buy the very best.
In addition to studying pedigrees, agents and experienced buyers do a lot of legwork before a sale.
The next step after I do the catalog preparation is to go out and physically look at the horse. For a sale like the September sale, I'll go to the farms 3 weeks in advance in order to be able to get through all the horses that are at that sale because it's such a large sale. For the July sale, I would do the same, but I wouldn't be as concerned about missing horses in that sale because it's a lot smaller. For the September sale, you really have to prepare early and look at the horses at the farm to make your first cut, and then begin to look at them at the actual sales when they get there.
July is pretty easy, but I prepare for September and July the same way. We'd spend a month going around the farms in the Lexington area, previewing the yearlings, make appointments with the farms and preview the yearlings on the farms. In July, you would get to see probably 90% of them on the farms. September would be a lot less because there's thousands ship in from all over the country for September. Although in September I would look at probably 1,200 horses myself on the farms prior to the sales. And from that list I would form a list of horses that I would look at a second time. My relook list, I would refer to that. And from that second look, then I would fine-tune it into horses that I would put on lists for various clients and for the syndicates that I put together to resell at the 2-year-old sales.
For 2-year-olds in training sales, buyers can see the horses in action at what are called previews or under tack shows.
2-year-olds in training sale, it's a little different sale in the sense that you're actually watching the horse perform. So instead of seeing the horses physically before the sale at a farm or whatever, you see them actually on the racetrack at the facility that they're going to be sold. And I try to get to that facility at least a week in advance, 5 days in advance, to watch them train over the racetrack, to watch them in the morning, to be able to see what sort of habits they have away from the barn. I think that's real important in terms of temperament, to see whether they're nervous, just how professional they are, how they move on the racetrack. With a 2-year-old sale, you get a lot more information about how the horse is going to be as far as the end product.
The 2-year-old sales obviously show what type of speed the horse has. Yearling sales are, obviously they're pedigrees you look at mostly, and somewhat confirmation at the yearling sales. I don't have a lot of experience at the yearling sales, but 2-year-old sales, I do like to go. You can see the horse move, you can see him work, and you kind of get a gauge how their soundness is going to be too at that 2-year-old age.
Ryan and other successful agents have developed an eye for a horse by looking at hundreds, even thousands of them. Trainer Nick Zito, who bought 1994 Kentucky Derby winner Gopher Gin at the Saratoga yearling sale, encourages new buyers to become familiar with conformation, the way a horse is put together.
Go to the sale, look at the horse. If you like the horse, buy it. And I think that's the best shot. Because, of course, don't get me wrong, if he's conformation, I mean, that's something, maybe I'm jumping too far, but conformation is your first step. I mean, you certainly want to learn about conformation. You don't want to go to a sale without learning conformation. That's extremely important. And that's what I would do. The first thing I would do is have some horse person, teach someone a little bit about conformation, and then we go from there.
When you buy a horse, when you look at a horse, you don't have to look at for half an hour and look at his legs sitting closely with the horse standing still. I mean, in my opinion, the horses are made to run, and you should look at them when they are moving. You should not look at them when they stand still. And it's the way they move. It's like looking at a nice girl. You know immediately whether if she stops, you then just start to find defects. But as long as the action is good, and yeah, nobody's perfect in this world. So, but if horses are moving well, I reckon you have more chances. If they are elegant, if they have a nice head and they move well, it's part of the deal. They should cover. They must cover a lot of ground when they move, and also they should move freely. They should be relaxed and, how can I say, have an elegant walk. It's very rare that a stiff mover becomes a good racehorse.
I go to the previews and just look for the precocity in the young 2-year-olds, scope. I like a filly with large nostrils that has, has good wind. The colts, I look for the masculinity in the colt, the big shoulder, large hindquarters, something of that nature.
Just as important as having an eye for a horse is the ability to see potential in a less than perfect individual.
I'd say one of the things where I have been fortunate and been successful at is accepting horses that have little conformational flaws that other people won't tolerate. Either they be a little small, a little immature looking, or conformation, a little toe out. Some people I find are very unforgiving with the faults of horses, and I've been lucky. I've bought some very good horses, raced a few myself that, given time, matured into nice race horses. I think Fairy Garden would be a good example of a filly that I bought here in September about 8-9 years ago. She cost 140. She was by Leafard. I think they were averaging about 350, 375 at the time. She was out of a great mare, but she was small. She was immature, toed out. But she won several stakes for me, and I sold her on to Mrs. Payson. She won several stakes for her.
If you're buying a horse for racing purposes, you can be a little bit more forgiving, I think, when it comes to the conformation. Forgiving in the sense that you're not having to resell the horse and have to worry about the perfect individual. And there's a lot of things that I personally can live with as far as a racing prospect goes that maybe others can't live with as far as looking at him to be resold. To me, a horse that toes out to some extent, that has a good knee on him and he has good distribution through his leg, I don't concern myself too much with, particularly if they're a good mover. When I stand off from a horse and I watch it move, if it's athletic, then to me that's not a fault that I would be concerned about. I have spent some time on the racetrack and in looking at horses that have been successful on the racetrack, there are a lot of horses that have flaws that you'd be amazed at. And I think it's important to know the difference, or try to know the difference between what'll be racing sound and what won't be.
At the same time, buyers have individual pet peeves, traits which make them pass on a horse.
I tend to stay away from horses that tend to toe out real bad or offset in the knees or something of that nature. I do train out in California, and you need a pretty, balanced horse when you're out there running on those harder surfaces.
We don't like to buy yearlings that we think are going to be big and backward, and we like to try and buy yearlings that hopefully are going to run as 2-year-olds, because we have so many homebreds ourselves.
My philosophy has always been that I won't buy a horse that I wouldn't pay the bills on myself.
Pedigree, conformation, and prevailing market trends all determine how much a horse will bring in the auction ring. Experienced buyers make their estimates well before the bidding starts.
Conformation is the first thing I look at, and then if a horse has a really nice pedigree, well then obviously he's going to be an expensive horse. So it's governed by the pedigree. You can find lots of nice individuals that are, don't have a great family, but if they have a strong pedigree, then you're really going to have to, they're going to be expensive horses. So the pedigree really dictates, on top of the conformation, how much you're going to have to pay. Obviously the strength of the first dam, the popularity of the sire, if he's a top proven sire, those are horses that are, they're going to be pricey individuals.
I come here, kind of have an idea what I'm going to pay for a colt or a filly. In this sale, I think you get a pretty good quality horse for the money you're talking here. I bought a colt here last year for $75,000. He's turned out to be one of the better 3-year-olds out there in California this year. Futurall. And I didn't pay very much for him. I paid $75 for him. So you could come to the sale and get a nice purchase for not spending a lot of money.
We try and evaluate the horses as we see them. Some horses we look at and we'll say, well, we'll buy him if he comes at a cheap price. And other horses, if we really like them, we'll probably spend a bit more. The weanling sale here is slightly different, where you're trying to buy 2 or 3 top-class weanlings. If one really stands out, then we'll pay a lot of money for it.
You know, you don't always get what you want in the sale. And again, I'm not the only one buying horses. There's so many talented people out there. So it's a little rough. You know, the more money you have, the easier it is, I assume. But that doesn't always work out that way either.
Once you have a short list of candidates, make sure you work with a good veterinarian to ensure that the horses are sound and capable of racing.
When I get the horses down to a short list, and they're actually horses that the owner and I have decided we want to consider bidding on, at that time I'll ask a veterinarian to take a look at what might be available in the repository. If there's not information in the repository sufficient to cover what we feel like would be the conditions of sale, then we might have to get some x-rays or have the horse scoped to be able to determine whether we're going to go ahead and bid or not.
We do fairly extensive pre-purchase exams with physical exams, check heart, eyes, testicles where appropriate, and do an endoscopic exam of the upper airway to make sure that all the breathing apparatus is completely normal and there's no dysfunctional anatomical structures. And then we'll follow up with a set of radiographs to make sure that there's no pathology found in the bones. There can be certain things that we can live with and some that we just really can't. Each veterinarian probably has their own fees that they charge. Generally speaking, $40 to $50 for a physical exam, anywhere from $50 to $75 for an endoscopic exam. In radiographs, you'd figure, anywhere from $60 to $70 per joint, depending on how many joints are radiographed. The repository is used primarily for pre-purchase exams at yearling, 2-year-old training sales and weanling sales, or horses of racing age. And primarily we look at the radiographs for a potential client that has intention of buying the horse, to where we can see if there's any pathology that we think is significant enough to where this horse cannot perform as an athlete. If a potential buyer doesn't actually do what I consider the correct thing, to have someone review the radiographs, then he's basically stuck with the horse. If he goes in and buys a horse out of the ring that's got a potential or huge problem and he cannot run, then it is not returnable at all. And that's a big difference from the way it was several years ago. And in fact, several years ago, each sale company had a different set of rules. And you had to, particularly at Fasig-Tipton or Keeneland or Barrett's or wherever, you had to follow by their rules, and you had to be fairly cognizant of what's going on with the different conditions of the sale.
In addition to veterinary advice, it's important to make sure you have the proper insurance once you buy a horse.
When a person signs a ticket, it's their horse. So a lot of times we advise people that maybe you should have some buyer's insurance, that to follow the Hammer insurance, which is readily available and relatively inexpensive. That should be in place before you ever sort of sign tickets, unless you're able to say, well, I'm not worried about what happens to the horse. 99.9% of the times, nothing happens to the horse, but you never know if a horse is going to get sick that night, colicking from the stress of the sale or things like that.
If you make your arrangements beforehand, one of the primary benefits is that you can request what is known as fall of the hammer coverage. Fall of the hammer coverage does not cost anything additional, and it will give you coverage the instant that you buy a horse. This could be very important because in the moments right after a sale, the horses have to be led back through the sales pavilion and through the sales grounds to their barns. Oftentimes, by that time, they're very excited and are fractious and difficult to handle. General liability insurance will protect you if one of your horses accidentally injures someone or damages someone else's property. But that coverage is clearly not applicable to any outside business interest, such as raising or racing thoroughbred horses. The price for horse insurance depends a bit on exactly what type of coverage you take. If you begin what's called an all risks mortality type policy, which covers you for almost all reasons that horses would die, and if it's on a yearling, the range in price is going to be somewhere between 2.5% and 3.5% of the insured value. So if you buy a $20,000 animal, the cost is somewhere going to be between $500 and $700.
Now that you've taken the right steps, you're ready to enter the fray. Before you start bidding, though, it's important to recognize that not all aspects of the auction process are obvious. You need to be aware of something called a reserve.
A reserve is a number which a consignor places on his horse, and that number is a number that he will take that horse home for. It will not be sold for that. In other words, if a man says he wants $50,000 for his horse, the horse does not get over 50, then it is reserve not attained. We didn't get beyond the reserve, so he takes it home. How do we handle them? The auctioneer bids one bid above what the public bids. The public bids $12,000, we bid $15,000, they bid $17,000, we bid $18,000. If they bid $20,000, they may get the horse if the reserve is $19,000. So they have to be one bid above the reserve, which the auctioneer will bid himself.
As far as knowing when you're in the ring what the reserve is, it's sometimes it's difficult. I think the more you bid in the ring and the more times you go through the process, you begin to get a feel for. It's sort of an instinctive thing. I think if the bidding feels like it's moving pretty fast, a lot of times it would be a reserve. When I walk into the ring, I have some idea of what I think a horse is worth. I'll usually wait for the bidding to develop before I'll actually engage in any bidding to see just what the pattern happens to be. If there's a lot of bidding that's coming from all over the ring or out back, then that tells me that the bidding's probably live and that people are on the horse. If it's relatively slow and it's coming from one or two places, and there's a couple of bid spotters that I know handle the reserves more than others, then you've got a sense of it being reserved.
Buying your first horse at auction can be exciting and scary at the same time. But knowing that you've done your homework will make the experience more enjoyable. Hopefully, it will be a risk well worth taking.
When you walk into a horse sale, arm yourself with as much information as available, all the way from veterinary information to conformation pedigree. Hire the right people to help you out in this situation, and the more informed you are, the better chance you have at success down the road.